need an awful lot of experience, real-world experience, before you can achieve a level of mastery. So it's the quality of the experience you have that matters.
Well, Malcolm, thank you very much for your time. You don't need an introduction, really, because everybody knows about your work, Blink, Tipping Point. You help the world. You help us think about the world a little differently. In Blink, you talk about this idea of the power of intuition, and Tipping Point is about change. You have a book called Outliers. Tell our audience what this book is about and why they should read it.
Outliers is a book that tries to explain, figure out what the kind of structural dimensions of success are. What are the explanations for why certain groups or certain people manage to thrive in difficult environments?
And so when we think and we assume that there are things that can be trained, in some cases you show predetermining factors of success.
Yeah,
and you also talk about the 10,000-hour rule.
Yeah, I'm very interested in, first of all, in understanding the role of things like generation and culture. And also I'm very interested in, I have a section, like you said, talks about the 10,000-hour rule, which is this notion from psychology that talks about just how much time is necessary to achieve mastery in a given field. And the answer is a lot longer than you think.
And so we're here at the Sports Analytics Conference. You talked in your panel a little bit about that. I like also the analogy you use in terms of the month where people were born and how that determines their factors. You want to take us through that?
Oh, that was just an observation that's been made about soccer and hockey, which shows that professional players in both those sports tend to cluster in certain parts of the year, have birthdays in the same parts of the year. And that is an effect from youth all-star leagues, that when you select players at very young ages to play in all-star leagues, the players who tend to get selected are the ones who are born closest to the cutoff date, because at the age of 7 or 8 or 9, if you are 11 months older than everyone else in your cohort, you have an enormous physical advantage. So people think that you're more talented, in fact, you're just older.
And so for the people and so for the people that are trying to get their kids to be born in a particular month, here the lesson is not so much that, it's consider the environment around the specific factors.
That we need to think very seriously about, to understand how enormously important, the environmental circumstances around success are.
And so as we talk about environment, another aspect of environment is culture. And you talk a bunch about, even if you have the data, sometimes it's even hard to step up and communicate this data, which many of our folks in our audience experience that in the business context. Do you want to talk us through that and tell us the lessons of how we should work with that?
Yeah, I have a chapter that's all about plane crashes. It talks about how one of the predictors of the likelihood of plane crashing is the nationality of the pilot. And the reason is that effectively piloting a plane is about communication in the cockpit. And some cultures have, more specifically, it requires open and honest communication between the pilot and the co-pilot, between the captain and the first officer. And where they do not communicate openly, planes get into difficulty. And some cultures have a problem with subordinates speaking openly and honestly with their superiors. And those cultures tend to have more plane crashes.
And so what do they do to fix it?
Well, what you have to do to fix it is to address that problem, is to put in place organizational cultures that compensate for the tendencies of national cultures, to teach pilots how to communicate with each other if there is a cultural impediment in place. But it says that succeeding in that world requires that you have a sophisticated understanding of people's cultural context.
That's great. You also have done a bunch of work in what makes a good decision. You talk about the concept of judgment. What can you teach us about the amount of decisions that are required in order to get to a state where you're a good decision maker?
Well, it's not just that, I mean, obviously you need if you have that 10,000 hours principle, it says that you need an awful lot of experience, real world experience, before you can achieve a level of mastery. But it's more than simply putting in the time. It has to do with whether you are, in an active way, learning from the decisions you make. So are you extracting lessons? Are you analyzing your decisions? Are you submitting them to some kind of outside empirical tests, to feedback? So it's the quality of the experience you have that matters. And I think that the lesson of the research on decision making is that the only way to achieve a high level of decision making mastery is to actively work at extracting the most kind of knowledge from the experience that you have.
Great. So we've learned quite a few things here. Of course, there are predetermining factors, but you can learn and develop a certain skill. And then over time, the act of decision is not just a decision itself, but it's a whole process where you learn from your mistakes and you learn how to make better decisions as a process.
Yeah.
Malcolm, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
I know you're very busy. Where do people go to find out more about your work?
My website, glabell.com.
Great. Well, until next time, I'm Bruno Aziza.